what if Brian did the intros instead of Matt? How weird would that be?
Be terrible. Absolutely terrible.
All right. I'm Brian.
I'm Matt. And we'll have better stuff than that for our what ifs.
Are we sure?
I don't think so. This is TV, guys, by the way. How's everyone doing out there?
They can't answer you.
Well, maybe they can. I'm going to wait. And in the time that I'm waiting, you're going to text me and say, I'm fine, Matt. Or whatever. You don't have to be doing fine. So how are you? You didn't text me. You suck. All right.
Sometimes I just wait until you see how long you're going to go with your bits.
He's doing a bit. Let's see how long it lasts. And crashing and burning. All right. No, we are talking about what... So, on Disney Plus, there's a new Marvel series. I don't know if I can say it's new anymore, because now I think by this point it'll be almost done.
Well, even by the time we're recording it, there's 5 episodes in.
Yeah, that's true. There's a Marvel series online on Disney Plus called What If, where they posit what would happen if certain choices in the Marvel universe happened differently. So we got to see, instead of Captain America, we got to see Captain Carter, Peggy Carter, get to be Miss Marvel, the Captain America character, and then other episodes. We had Marvel Zombies. That was something.
We had Thanos just being kind of part of the crew of Guardians of the Galaxy.
Just hanging out. It's he used good words, and now I don't hate anymore.
And his plan of destroying all life is just a background funny runner.
Literal genocide is used as a joke. Yeah, it's probably genocide, but you know what? It would have worked.
Was that Josh Brolin doing the voice?
It was Josh Brolin. They got most of the original cast. Some of them you can really tell the difference. They didn't get Chris Evans or Robert Downey Jr. for it, so you can definitely tell the difference in them. Mm-hmm. But a lot of the ones they did come back.
Yeah, I was surprised with some of them.
Yeah, and it makes sense because when they announced this, Kevin Feige was like, "Guess how many? You would not believe how many names we got to come back for this." And then the first episode had someone besides Chris Evans, and you're like, oh, so not everyone came back. Okay.
But it did have Sebastian Stan and Haley Atwell, and was there anybody else from the original? Was it the original Dr. Erskine?
No. Original Dr. Erskine. Yeah, they got Stanley Tucci for 2 lines. They did not get Hugo Weaving back for Red Skull, but I think that they got the guy who replaced him, because it was not Hugo Weaving in the movies of Infinity War and Endgame.
Yeah, I knew that, yeah.
So I can't remember that guy, the actor. He's the guy from Walking Dead, but I think he continued on as providing the voice for that.
Anyways, we decided we'd do our own what-ifs.
Our own what-ifs. And by our own, we mean yours. So we had a number of you guys send us your what-ifs. We had a couple of our own, and we're just going to kind of go over, what we got 8 of them. So here are 8 what-if episodes for you, and we'll go ahead and start with Chris Hallam. He asked us a number of questions, but one of them was, what would happen in Friends if Janice married Chandler?
I actually have a chain reaction that I was thinking about this today with Janice marrying Chandler.
All right.
I think Janice marrying Chandler back in season 3 when they were dating, so she didn't get back together with her husband, the Mattress King.
Yep.
Back then. So most of the series they would have been together, which means going forward, Monica and Chandler would not have hooked up in London. Mm-hmm. Which maybe Monica would have gone with her original plan, which is to hook up with Joey. Okay? Meaning that maybe Monica and Joey would have been a couple in Friends, which then would have meant that Joey would not have been single to do the trade dates with Phoebe, which introduced her to Mike. Which means not only would Chandler and Monica not get together, which means Phoebe and Mike would have never met.
That is an awesome... See, this is why we're doing this. That is a great chain of events you're talking about. I mean, there's other things, too, that affect, for instance, just from a writer's point of view, how would they end certain seasons? So you talked about London, and absolutely right, that ending it with Joey and Monica instead, that would have been the hook for that end of season. But there was the Rachel giving birth episode. Here's what I don't think would have happened. I don't think, because in that episode, Janice shows up, and then there's the whole episode of having to deal with Janice being pregnant and being annoying in the same room as Rachel. And so the writers would have done something different, because I don't think the writers would say, yeah, let's make 2 of our cast be pregnant at the same time for the whole series. not a lot of shows have even done that. The only one I can even think of is The Office doing that. But it wouldn't have worked for this. So you wouldn't have had Janice in there. So you would have had to go with a different route in making that episode unique.
Something else that is interesting is, it's always interesting when you add a character to the group. So they never added Paul Rudd officially to the main cast, but in the last couple seasons, he was kind of an unofficial seventh friend hanging out with them. Mm-hmm. But he actually fit along with them a lot better than Janice did. The whole runner for the first 3 seasons, which is when she would have been not dating Chandler, is that she was annoying. The character, even Chandler, was annoyed by her. How would that work, having her be around part of the gang all the time? Now, I don't think they would have been complete jerks to her because they like Chandler. At one point, Ross even said, Chandler's our friend and Janice makes him happy, so let's just deal with it. And so I think they would have been civil to her, but I don't think it would have been quite the mesh that adding Mike would have been.
Yeah, I mean, even the one where the Joey and Janice's day of fun, that episode, that really played with that idea that, the friends, they will, because they love Chandler, they're going to try and make an effort to like Janice too. But you're right, it wouldn't have worked. Plus, some of the best stuff in Friends happens after the Chandler and Monica coupling, that they work really, really well, and there's just this marked difference between the quality of the show before Chandler and Monica got together and after they got together.
And I mean, I could have seen them try to hide Monica and Joey's relationship like they did with Monica and Chandler, but it wouldn't have been the same as with Joey finding out and Rachel and Phoebe and Ross. They all found out in really unique ways, and obviously Ross wouldn't have had. Well, I suppose Ross it would be still his sister, but it wouldn't be his sister and his best friend, college roommate getting together. It'd be his second best friend with his sister. It wouldn't be the same as my sister.
Yeah, exactly. Going off of that, too, we actually could pivot into the next what if. Not all of them are going to be about Friends, but we had a lot of suggestions about Friends, so we're going to do 2 of them. And one of them was a different coupling of what instead about Rachel and Joey. Now, they definitely played with that in storyline a couple times, but they never fully committed.
All right, you guys can all get your hate comments ready. I think Joey and Rachel were a better couple than Ross and Rachel. Because Ross and Rachel, they were not that interesting, and they weren't even together that much. And I think Rachel and Joey had a better chemistry, better fit for their personalities than Ross and Rachel.
They're both more, I guess, shallow is the best word that I can think of. Rachel and Joey are definitely a lot more concerned about their looks than Ross. Sure, he has his insecurity. Anyone who has insecurity is going to be concerned about their looks, but it's a concern in a different way.
And they're both more fun-loving. Ross was just so serious all the time. Whereas Rachel and Joey both could, I feel like they would just hang out, have fun, go on fun dates,
Yeah, I mean, it's not a bad point that you bring up. And so the what if of this, of Rachel and Joey being together, is that you could have a coupling that would be a really good dynamic duo. I think the two together could have a lot of fun. I like Joey and Phoebe's relationship of secretly controlling the group, and while I don't think Rachel would be in that sort of way, I can definitely see a lot of Joey and Rachel moments happening of them being a couple, and because you saw it with Chandler and Monica of trying to hook people up. That's what couples kind of do that. When you're a couple and you have friends that aren't a couple, you connive and you try and create that, and you try and make something happen out of nothing sometimes, or you make something happen out of a very small thing. I would have really liked to see Joey and Rachel try and set up Ross or something like that. I really would love to see the sort of people that Joey and Rachel together would pick for Ross.
Especially since you'd have the underlying tension of Rachel and Ross could still have been exes. They still could have dated earlier in the series, gone through the whole 18 pages front and back, all that nonsense, but then just left it at that.
Yeah, and you do have the anger at the end of it. I think that they had to. I totally understand the will they, won't they, and having to come together at the end for Rachel and Ross at the end. But in this world of not doing that, I think a good second place would have been Charlie. I thought Charlie and Ross worked really well. Aisha Taylor is a really fantastic actress, and she was pretty funny for the stuff that she was given.
Yeah.
So I think she could have been a good supplement in that final season that we see her kind of adapted into the group. I love the episode where
Ross is fine?
Yeah,
Yes.
Ross is fine and doing the dinner party, and Aisha Taylor's just, you're on fire.
And it would an interesting dynamic because they would be two exes who basically just switched because Joey dated Charlie and Ross dated Rachel, which was the whole point of that episode.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that would have been all right. I apart from ending with Rachel and Ross together, where you would have had people like, no, this can't happen. They had to end up. I think apart from that fan reaction, I think we would have gotten some really good episodes out of that.
Because like will they, won't they doesn't always have to end in will they. Another example, just a quick tangent. I know you haven't seen it, but at the end of Cheers, there's the whole Sam and Diane were thing, and then Diane wasn't on the show at the end. She came back for the finale, and her and Sam were going to run off, potentially be together. But then they didn't go through with it, and then Sam came back to the bar with the rest of the crew. And surprisingly, it was Norm who had a very wisdomous line. He said, "You always come back to your true love," meaning the bar for Sam.
There you go. And that suggestion, by the way, for that, I didn't say at the beginning, that was from my wife, Angie Rodenberg. So she gave us that suggestion. Let's move on to something that doesn't involve a relationship. We had a suggestion from Andrew Brower for what would happen if, in Breaking Bad, Walt doesn't die at the end when he saves Jesse. And one thing I was thinking about with this is that we have the Better Call Saul prequel, which is fantastic. I love that show. But we also had the El Camino movie that followed the end of Breaking Bad, focusing on Jesse. And that just felt pointless. It didn't feel like it had any weight to it or any reason to exist. Yeah. I think that just because it was directed fine and well acted doesn't mean it was intriguing. I think we would have had a very intriguing premise of if Walt would have survived and maybe been captured and Jesse trying to get away, having something of Walt and Jesse reconnecting and reuniting. I thought that their ending was fine. If we're talking about Breaking Bad in a vacuum, I think that it ended perfectly. It was a wonderful series ending. But in this world of creating it where he doesn't die and he's able to come back to life, what if there is still some factor that's left in this drug ring of people needing Heisenberg back? And what if you need Jesse and Walt to work back together and you have to do something of Walt conniving to get out of jail or something like that? It would lose a lot of the realism, but then again, sort of blowing off Gus's face and him walking out of a room with half a face on.
Well, that's the thing, is who is there left to answer to? Gus is dead. Hector Salamanca's dead. Don Eladio's dead. All the crazy Nazi guys are dead.
Yeah.
So they'd basically be free to, if they wanted to, they could start up the business and sell meth however they wanted to. They wouldn't have to answer to anybody.
Yeah. Now, on the flip side of that, this is the reason why they ended it this way, because they already did a portion of that. The final season was a bit of, well, no one's facing them. Now Walt's in charge, and look what happens when Walt is in charge. And he finally gets what he wanted, but then he has to live for a year in solitude because he still, no matter how smart he is, he wasn't able to control it all. And so I don't know if there's a storyline that's out there that is not redundant for what they did that keeps Walt alive.
I don't think there's any going back to Skyler and Walter Jr.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that maybe would be a good focus, because Walt had a good, had the admission to Skyler of, I did it for me, and that was a great, capstone end moment. But I think if they did come back to this, maybe that would be another route that they'd have to go of how do you prove yourself again to Skyler and Walt Jr. and Holly.
Yeah. Which, at that point, Holly's still a baby. It's just, interesting, because he closed up his life because he knew he was going to die. And if you don't, then it's well, now what?
Yeah. I think it would have to be something of, the only thing that would bring Walt into a picture again would, as going back to what I said earlier, something happens with Jesse. And he again, because Jesse is his weakness. And he makes choices that are not the right choices, that are not the smartest choices in what he wants to do, because he's still invested in Jesse, and he has this fatherly thing with him. And so, again, I think that would be what pulls him out if he has to try and break out of jail, or something happens is because something happened with Jesse.
I think there's a group of people who, I don't think he would try to reconnect with his family, but I think there's a group of people who he cares about, who he would definitely intervene if something was happening to them. I think if Skylar or Walter Jr. or Holly, or even Marie, for the extension of Hank, I think he would definitely do anything for them, but he would probably try to do it in a way that they didn't know was coming from him.
Yeah. Yep. All right. So, also from Andrew, same guy who asked the first one, he asked about in The Office, what would happen if Jim and Karen never broke up?
Well, I think there's two sides to that. First, you can think of what would happen with Jim and Karen, and then you have to talk about what would happen with Pam.
Yeah.
So we'll start with Jim and Karen. See, Jim and Karen didn't have a terrible relationship. If it wasn't for the underlying feelings and history with Pam, they could have been a good couple.
Yeah, you look at the difference in the relationship between Jim and Karen when they're still in Stanford, and then when they come back to Scranton. Jim is a completely different boyfriend.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and if one of them had gotten the job in New York, which I think Jim would have, because didn't Jim remove his name from contention before he chose Ryan?
Yep.
So then Jim would have been, it wouldn't have been as interesting and funny as having Ryan be Michael's boss, but Jim would have been Michael's boss, and Jim would have been, and then Karen would have probably relocated with him, and they would have had their own life. I think it's the thing where it would have been bad for the show, but it could have been good for the characters in that vacuum. I still think that Jim is better suited for Pam, as we can see, but it's one of the things where if it never happened, you'd never really know.
So here's what I think in that regard. I think with Jim coming back to Scranton, because I think you're right that he would get that job, but Jim would also have to travel back to Scranton. And I think, and you might call this a blasphemy because, this is a terrible thing. He already had this chance, and he broke up with Amy Adams because he was focused on Pam still. But I think we could have seen an affair storyline, honestly. That with Jim coming back, that he finds himself still captured by those feelings with Pam, and the more that he comes back, the more he's reminded of that old life, and eventually is suckered in, and that's where all this drama comes in. I don't think that would have been a good choice. I don't think us as fans would have liked Jim nearly as much, but I could see them developing that story.
Yeah, that would have changed the tone of the show, because The Office really isn't like an affair type show, except for the whole
Except for Stanley.
Well, and Dwight, Angela, and Andy.
And that. It is absolutely that kind of show.
Well, and Michael was the other man.
Except for all of these ideas that I'm suddenly remembering at the last second.
Aside from those, isn't it?
And Aaron with new Jim once Andy's on a boat.
Well, they were broken up or no?
They weren't technically.
Oh yeah, I suppose.
So besides all of that,
question though is, would Pam have gotten back together with Roy eventually, or do you think they were officially done at the point where she broke with up with him when he's freaking out at the bar?
Yeah, I think that was more about her. Like, even though Jim was in the picture, and I think maybe that was smart writing of, she has to come to this on her own without it being because of Jim. That she finally has had enough of boring old Pammy, and then she's able to stand up for herself, and, that's what Beach Day was for her. And she wasn't with Jim during Beach Day.
No.
And so, once she was able to have that assuredness and that, I know what I want, I'm going to chase what I want, I think that she could have had some really interesting arcs on her own without Jim. I guess I don't have a what would happen with her, but do you have something?
Not really. I mean, the only thing I think is your mind goes, oh, would she got to get back with Roy? No. I mean, I think she would have just gone on and lived her life. Maybe she would have ended up with Brian the camera guy.
Oh, no. Why would you say that? But yeah, apart from the affair storyline, because I could see it heading into that, and there being a bigger three-way triangle of Jim getting that job with him and Karen, and then Pam suddenly assured of knowing what she wants. I think it turns the head on it, because it was always Jim pining after Pam. Mm-hmm. And I think that they could have changed it into, not drawing her character down, but a version of Pam pining after Jim, but pursuing and chasing after him.
Plus another thing I just thought of, if Jim gets the job, that means Ryan doesn't get the job. Ryan stays in Scranton, and maybe Ryan kind of takes over the pranking Dwight section. But here's the thing: is that Ryan wouldn't put the dedication and time into the pranks that Jim does.
Yeah, Ryan's lazy. he's Dwight without like the hard work, because he has the aspirations of power that Dwight has, but he just wants to like manipulate his way into it, where Dwight's like, I will work my butt off to make this happen. So honestly, when they did the Dwight and Ryan team up for foiling Jim, that should have been better, because it is two characters that have that common interest, and you could have had a lot of fun with that, and I just don't think that they did it well.
I agree.
All right, well, let us move over to a different show recommended by Brandy Terrace, Big Bang Theory. Now, we've seen Penny and Leonard, but what would have happened if Penny got in a relationship with Sheldon? And I'm going to say real quick, ew.
You're not a fan of the Shenny?
No. Okay, I will say I do really like Sheldon and Penny's friendship. They have some really awesome moments together, and it's really good TV to see these very polar opposite people have these moments of shared bondness, like when Penny collapses in the shower and she needs to go to the hospital, and Sheldon, like, he does it, but he does it in a very Sheldon way, so it's still funny, but it's also of course he cares about her, even though he doesn't care about anyone. And
you're watching through it, you can remind me, that's before anything with Amy, right?
Yeah, or maybe it's like it's around the same time, same season.
Because at the beginning of the show, there's never any hint. There's never like Sheldon and Leonard being like, "Ooh, wonder which one is going to get to date Penny." Yeah, Sheldon is for most of the series until later on, kind of
asexual.
Yeah, I was going to say asexual. Like there's no thought of him being. It's like in Scrubs when Carla says, "No man's going to videotape me getting birth unless he's completely asexual," and Ted walks in. She's like, "Oh, okay." Like that. It's like that where he is that character. So they can build that connection with him and Penny, and you never actually believe that it's going to land that way. So then even later on, when Sheldon starts actually developing feelings for Amy, you don't go back and think, well, what about Penny? Because they've already been established as they're really close platonically.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I don't think it would have worked. I mean, obviously it wouldn't have worked. It's not like Rachel and Joey where I say that would be better. I think that they would have learned a lot about each other's worlds, because, Penny would have probably learned a lot about science, because that's what all Sheldon talks about, and Sheldon would learn about anything pop culture.
So to create the what if for this, of them getting together, trying to figure out what would be the thing that brings them together, and there'd have to be some sort of like trying to understand females or reproduction or coitus or whatever. There has to be something cerebral for Sheldon of why he would engage into this, because the thing with Amy is, it's all logic based, and then it starts to develop into feelings. So we have to have some sort of catalyst. So I feel like there'd have to be something that would start off of like, I have to study her, and that like that's the guise of entering the relationship. Whereas Penny, what would be Penny's thing?
I think I got it, because I also watched Young Sheldon, which is not great, not terrible. That's my review of that show, but.
If you're looking for something right down the middle, there it is.
Pretty much. But I could see Penny, and I think she did get along with her when she was on an episode of Big Bang Theory, getting along with Missy, Sheldon's sister, who's very much kind of like Penny. She's not the science type, because, going back in time to young Sheldon, Sheldon's the weird one in his family. His family is not a family of scientists. It's a normal Texas family, and he's the weird one. So Penny could have had a connection, like a sisterly bond with Missy, which somehow led to Sheldon seeing her in a different way.
Yeah. It's hard for me to even imagine Sheldon developing feelings for Penny, but then again, at the same time, it's hard for me to imagine Penny developing feelings for Sheldon. It's so like polar opposites.
It's like when they talked about how awkward it would be for Marshall and Robin to date on How I Met Your Mother.
Yeah, it's like if you put Troy and Britta together on Community. No one in their right mind would have those two date as a couple.
Shots fired.
Shots fired. That's what you get, Community. That's what you sit in the corner and you think about what you've done.
I forget when it happened, but at one point, Abed said on the show, "This is going to be the most boring thing that happened since Britta dated Troy." Oh no, Jeff said that.
At least they were aware of it afterwards. All right, I have a suggestion that I had thought of. Since we have a lot of relationship ones, I wanted to jump into something that's not relationship focused. So from WandaVision, what if it wasn't Agatha all along?
Then we wouldn't have that awesome song.
That's absolutely true. That song was a banger, guys. But, you know, if you're like, okay, so who is... And even though I kind of asked that, it did reveal that it wasn't Agatha all along. Even though that's what the song was, it was really Wanda all along. And so, you know, technically that's already answered. But I'm going in another direction. I want to go with that fan theory. So many fans are like, oh, Mephisto's going to show up. Mephisto's going to show up. So what would happen if it was really Mephisto doing everything? And Agatha can still be Agatha. It still can be Agatha Harkness serving Mephisto, similar to Kaelius serving Dormammu in the Doctor Strange movie. You know, that you have her doing the dirty work, but then she channels in to bring Mephisto into this realm, and you have suddenly a much bigger fight than Agatha and Wanda floating in air. Is that you now have Wanda having to face the devil himself over the town of, I can't even remember what the town was, but Westview, thank you. Over the town of Westview. And that way, then you can also tap into every single... Because let's be honest, all of the characters, like Vision fought Vision, and there was a really cool way that they fought in like the logic terms of it. I liked that scene that they did, but I think you could absolutely scrap White Vision and have Vision and Wanda both have their hands full, while also having their twins having to fight them too. You know, they have superpowers themselves, and then also whatever her name was, who came in. What was her name?
Talking about Monica Rambeau?
Monica Rambeau, thank you. That took me way too long. I have my nerd status revoked. But Monica also gained powers too. You have 5 characters that could have powers, and then you face them off against Dormammu, and then Mephisto. Maybe even have Agatha turn sides once she realizes what she's done, and maybe even have a redemption arc for her, and she taps into the powers of Quicksilver. You have 6 guys versus Mephisto. You could absolutely do an amazing fight scene with that. And then you also have Mephisto now in the MCU. I think we could have had something really cool with that. I don't think that that's specifically better than what we got, but I think that that is a way to go.
See, I'm a little quiet at this point because I'm kind of within the last couple of years, a Marvel convert. We talked about it once on our WandaVision episode, but I caught into Marvel right in the middle of Avengers Infinity War. I'm like, this is interesting. I should go check out what all these characters are about. So I don't have all the comic knowledge that Matt does.
And yet I still forget Monica Rambeau. So, I mean, is there someone else that you thought, oh, this could easily be a culprit, or is there a way that they should have gone?
The other thing that they could have done is maybe have Doctor Strange be involved.
Yeah, and I know that they had thought about doing that, having him pop up. I just don't know in what role. So if he showed up, what do you think he would do?
It's hard because he's not a villain, so he would be messing with it for some kind of better reasons. Yeah. I don't know. It just wouldn't fit.
Yeah, I think you could have had Doctor Strange in it because Agatha is reading out of the Darkhold book, the Book of the Dead, and that actually was from Doctor Strange. Like, that book was stolen out of Doctor Strange's library that you saw in that movie. And then they actually put it into some Marvel TV because you saw it pop up in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. and then you saw it pop up in Marvel's The Runaways, even though neither of those are technically canon. But having Doctor Strange, that's how he learned about the Orb of Agamotto and the Time Stone. The Eye of... Thank you. Yeah. Sorry. And the Time Stone. See? I don't deserve to be talking about this. That's how he learned about all of that. So he gets to be, studying the Darkhold, and it helps... Wanda tap into her full potential, that he helps provide that answer of, these runes. This is how you can trap Agatha. This is how you can turn that around on her.
Alternate option for what if it was Wong all along. Wong did.
That would rhyme.
Yeah, it was Wong all along. It was all Wong.
It's Wong. It's all Wong.
What if they said that Wong was trying to usurp Doctor Strange's power and turned villainous and created the West Point stuff, and it wasn't Wanda, and it was all Wong, leading into Doctor Strange 2 having the main villain be Doctor Strange versus Wong.
Doctor Strange versus Wong. You heard it here first. Or, I mean, they could also tap into Baron Mordo. He actually exists as the villain and that would be another good one, too. Baron Mordo could absolutely have popped up. Because it would be hard. They already did that with Sharon Carter in the Falcon and Winter Soldier of oh, by the way, she actually might be a villain. But I think that you could do that with Baron Mordo. That's a good idea, too, of having him be pulling the strings to try and even turn Doctor Strange against Wanda. That's a good idea. Look at that. We did it. All right, we got a couple more. From Jeremy, we call him Nashville. He suggested, what about if Marshall and Lily stayed broken up? We've asked about a couple of these guys, what if they got together. Well, Lily and Marshall broke up after season 1, and in season 2, they started away from each other. So what if they never got back together? And the answer to that is that would be terrible.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm trying to think of specifics in there, because you got to think about the Marshall and Barney relationship, because when they broke up, Barney had this whole thing where he kept trying to set up Marshall, but then he would always steal the women away from Marshall. And then later on you realize it wasn't him being a jerk, it was him trying to keep Marshall for Lily because he wanted them to get back together. How long would that go? Would he just always have that hope of Marshall and Lily get back together, or would he eventually just abandon that?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, there's only so much, because Marshall's characterization is codependent. Honestly, it's codependent on Lily. It doesn't make him a weak character because of that. Same with Lily, doesn't make her a weak character. But they can't exist on their own, just based on how they're set up, because of how good their story is. You can't do it on their own. And any other person, because Marshall did date a few people in that time, not too many, but every single person felt wrong. And even the writers knew that when they're writing them, so they gave them some defect, when they had, what's her name from Firefly on and made her, have crazy eyes.
Oh, yeah.
And it's they knew that just didn't work. And so they didn't have anything else that they had for them. And so if you kept them apart, I think How I Met Your Mother, that one of the positive effects of it would be that the show would actually not go as many seasons. Because I don't think they can have those two apart and have that show last as long as it did. They are the lifeblood of How I Met Your Mother.
Yeah, because amidst Ted and Robin and Barney going through their relationships, you always had that stable foundation of Robin and Marshall and Lily in the mix.
Yeah. The writers probably wouldn't have had the Marshall and Robin platonic episode. I think they honestly would have tried, before they even did it with Barney, I think that they would have done a Marshall and Robin arc.
You think it would have been an arc, or would have just been an episode?
I think it would have been an arc, because think about Barney and Robin, and Barney settling into a monogamous relationship is also very against his character, and they made it work enough, but still it never at any point felt like this is completely natural. There was always a part of you that's this isn't Barney's character for him to be like this. And so I think Marshall and Lily, because they had some really good... I really like the episode where they go to Marshall's Minnesota bar. I think that's a great episode for their relationship. And I think that sort of relationship is exactly what we would expect from them as a couple.
Also, I don't think that Lily would have been on the show anymore. I don't think we would have kept up with both of them. I think it would have been Lily's gone, and then we got the rest of the other four of them hanging out in New York.
You're right. I think that's absolutely true. And I think you would have seen a lot more, as I had brought that up about the bar, I think you see a lot more bonding of Minnesota and Canada.
Yeah.
They would have done a lot more with running jokes of that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And Lily, I think, honestly, Lily, I called both of them codependent characters. I think you're absolutely right that there's not enough unique about Lily without Marshall. I think Marshall has enough unique about him that he could exist without Lily.
Yeah.
I don't think the same could be said of Lily.
True. I think Marshall is a more dynamic character.
Yeah. Yep. All right. Final one. Again, one from me is, what if they actually would have brought back Walt in Lost? I know that they brought him back for some guest spots, but they had if you were alive during the time that Lost was on the air and you were actually following stuff from the creators, they promised so many times from season 2 on, they're like, we know that Malcolm David Kelly is aging and we had planned for that and we had this idea in motion. Please trust us. We will pay off. And they said that for multiple seasons. And guess what? They didn't. And they eventually were like, all right, we couldn't make this work. We had a plan, but we had to scrap it. And Brian, you and I had a theory about what ended up happening. So what was that theory that we had?
The theory was that the Walt plans got transposed onto Desmond.
Yep.
Because Desmond is another special character. He has all these special qualities, especially in the last season. We talked before about how he was missing for a while, and when they got back to that home stretch about ending up the show and really diving into the mythology of the island, that's when Desmond came back and was really interesting. That's where Walt could have been brought in. Even look back to the end of season 3 with what would later be known as Taller Ghost Walt. That's not a fan theory. Sawyer says that in the episode.
That's such a terrible... Oh, my gosh. It's like they needed to bring him back, and yet they couldn't figure out a way to do it naturally. And they're just like, all right, he's a ghost, but he's also older for some reason.
Well, we don't know he was a ghost. They said he was... We don't know he was a ghost. They said that in the show. Basically, Locke is in the giant pit of the Dharma graves, about to kill himself. Dark show at times. And
yep. You know, mass graves and a suicide about to happen in it, and then a ghost shows up. Yeah, dark show.
He sees Walt. And this is not the first time that Walt's just appeared. Remember, at the beginning of season 2, he shows up and appears to Shannon.
Yep, and actually gets Shannon killed. Way to go, Walt!
Yeah. This time, he stops Locke from killing himself and basically says, the only thing we hear him say, you have work to do. Later on, Locke implied that Walt told him he had to kill Naomi. We don't know how much of that was Locke interpreting, or if Walt actually sat down and said, here's what you need to do. There's going to be this woman. You need to throw a knife in her back. We don't know.
Make sure she's not facing you. When you have the knife, wait for her back to be turned and then throw it. That'll get her.
So it's just this quality of Walt being able to seemingly be in two places at once. We never saw Walt actually acknowledge seeing Shannon in the woods. So we don't know what that really deal is. But I think that could have played into what happened with Desmond in season 6, which is what he started to be able to pierce the barrier between the sideways world and the main world. At one point, he's on the real world, and he's saying, there's another place, and I saw you there, we're there together. He's consciously aware, beginning to be aware of the sideways world. That could fit right in with what we've seen of Walt. And these visions of Walt could be Walt from the sideways world.
I think you're absolutely right, and I think that the way that I would do it is I think after season 2, I don't mind I like Desmond as a character, and I don't know if there's a way to do both Desmond and Walt at the same time based on what we think they had in mind for Walt. But with season 2, once they blow up the hatch, what if that messes up the island in a similar way, but not quite the same as the time travel, but in a similar way where it breaks something on the island like it did when Locke pushed the donkey wheel, or Ben pushed whoever did it first to screw it up.
Ben did it first.
So when Ben broke the island, what if it did it similar way? And the whole idea of season 3 is in the background trying to bring Walt back to the island. And because he needs to be the one that saves it, and that somehow they're able to work through that in season 3, because that's where that time jump happens, because they did a time jump in the show. And Brian, you were saying, there's no other way, there's no other reason why they would do a time jump if it wasn't for bringing the time up to a normal standard for us to catch up to Walt. So what if that time jump was happening for them to be able to fix the island, to be able to bring Walt back from the real world onto the island, and then for him to be that way and be that old?
Yeah. And another thing to think about is if Walt takes over some of Desmond's storyline, is it Walt that is trying to save Charlie, or does Charlie not get saved because Desmond doesn't have those powers, and Charlie doesn't have his impactful drowning, not Penny's boat moment.
Yeah, I mean, if we're really fleshing that out, then that absolutely would be the case that would happen if in a vacuum. I think the writers would do something different with that. But you're absolutely right, is that he would have died from getting struck by lightning. That was the first one we saw.
Was that before going into the water to save Claire from drowning?
No, you're right. That was at first. So he would have just drowned like Joanna.
Yep.
And then we would have been like, What? He drowned. Like, I guess, full circle, he ended up drowning, but his drowning was more impactful. And
so drowned isn't a word. The word is drowned. So it's drowned is the past tense of drowned.
That's not true. I make up words. I'm Dr. Seuss. All words are made up.
If they're made up by people who create the dictionary, and then those are the words.
Yeah, well, that's a fascist system. So I'm not going to conform to your fascism. So that's where I think that would go, is I really like what they set him up for. But also his powers, so to speak, were different from Desmond's that they ended up with. And so there is room for both of them, but Walt's was like this envisioning something happening. And so what if creating something out of nothing sort of mindset.
What if they're like the Wonder Twins and they have powers that complement each other, and like Walt and Desmond together can save the island and defeat the Man in Black?
That was the worst what if of the night. Desmond's like, form of puddle of water. So what do you guys think? We gave you some more what else. Tell us what some of your answers are. We would love to hear you guys if you're like, Matt, that is so stupid that you said this. Here's what would happen. Please tell us. Maybe don't call me stupid. I'm a fragile person, and I try my best not to.
Ooh, I got one more.
Okay.
What if we didn't almost forget to do trivia?
Oh, I knew that we had trivia, and I actually have a trivia, even though we haven't discussed it.
We haven't.
But
good.
I don't remember what last week's was.
We're just going to do this on air.
Oh.
What was the topic of last week?
Was it instrumental songs?
Yes.
Okay, so then this is my third week in a row with trivia.
All right, I got next week.
Pull your weight, man. All right, so the theme from Peter Gunn, that was 2 weeks ago, because we revealed this last week. You're right.
We know what our podcast is, guys. All right, we definitely didn't just take like a 20-minute pause we cut out because we had to look up what last week's trivia was.
Definitely not.
Nope. So we talked about Good Morning, Miss Bliss, which was the precursor which would eventually become Saved by the Bell. And I said, what actress played the title character of Miss Bliss? And that was actress Hayley Mills, who was the star of the original Freaky Friday, not the Lindsay Lohan one, but the original one from the 70s.
All right. Well, we talked tonight about Big Bang Theory. We don't have too many Big Bang Theory trivias, but Sheldon's sister, I can't vouch for every single time. I apologize.
I know where you're going with this.
I think that it was played by the same actress every time, but at least the very first time. The actress who played Sheldon's sister in Big Bang Theory is in another very popular show. What actress is it, and what popular show that's currently on is she in?
And it is a show that we have done an episode on.
Yeah. That's the more important, in my opinion. Since we've talked about it, that means it's legitimate. All right, well, that is it. Like I said, tell us your what ifs. Oh, also, coming up, I think that you still have enough time. Tell us your superlatives, because we want to do kind of, I mean, it's like a graduation episode, but most likely to so-and-so, and we'll come up with characters from TV shows that we think would be most likely to be fun to cook with, or go on a road trip with, or rob a bank with. Mm-hmm. You know, just normal everyday activities. So tell us some of your ideas, and we will both pick our choices. You can let us know your choices as well. But in the meantime, I'm Matt.
I'm Brian.
And we're reminding you to stay tuned and keep watching.